So if you see my past video review of the Laguna 1412 bandsaw, uh, I kind of love that high-low fence they come with, and I kind of hate it. The problem is when it's high, you can't get the guards or the guides down to where it's usable if you're doing like 1 or 2 inch material, which is probably 80% of what I do. And if you flip it around and you bring it down, the reference face is too small to do 1 or 2 inch material. There's just not enough reference face there. You can end up wobbling the board. So I looked around for some T-track or buying another one of the fences and just cutting that top off. That was my other thought, but it was just outrageously expensive, and I couldn't find any T-track that would fit it. So what I've decided to do is, well, make my own T-track. And I've had some of this aluminum L brackets laying around. So the plan is to mount the piece of aluminum onto some wood, I guess. I'm going to probably use old oak because I got some old oak laying around that's kind of scrappy. And what I'll do is screw it to a board, lay it out so it pinches onto the little T bracket, and go from there. So this is me trying to figure out how I'm gonna place it and where I'm gonna dimension it. It's not starting off great. But the first thing I need to do is cut that piece there in half. The two pieces of L bracket I have there are different thicknesses. One's 1/8 inch and one's 1/4 inch. So I'm going to use that longer piece, cut it in half, and use it for the top and bottom. And I'll probably use that short piece that's actually thicker for like a stability item later. So you can cut it with any woodworking saws, but I really don't like using my chop box for it because two reasons. One, it just shoots aluminum everywhere, the little bits, and it also gets into my dust collection, and I reuse my sawdust for compost. So I've decided I'm going to clamp it to the bench and just use my little cordless circular saw. So this is me getting ready to do that. And of course, I forgot to hit the record button. So this is a reenactment of me cutting it in half. Okay, so now I have the two aluminum pieces. What I'm going to do is try and fit it temporarily onto the actual fence holder thing, whatever you want to call it. Fence mount, fence bracket, fence. It's the part of the fence that holds it to the table. Anyway, I'm going to slide the two pieces of aluminum extrusion in and slide it up underneath there and clamp it down and figure out what my spacing is. So first I have to clamp it down. And now that I have it clamped down, I can take some very basic measurements. It comes out to about almost exactly 1.5 inch spacing there, which is pretty awesome. As you can see, I'm actually trying to show it to you. It's a little over 1.5 inch, 3/4. Somewhere there. Again, it doesn't have to be perfect, but it needs to be fairly close. And then I need to figure out how deep it's going to be, how much clearance I need around that bracket so it'll slide back and forth some. So I'm measuring and more measuring. So I go to my pile of wood over here. The lower section is all cut-offs and scraps and leftovers and garbage wood. I shouldn't say garbage, but got to find something that's fairly straight, long enough. Finally find one. Yep, that's a nice board. Kind of like it. And I have another one over here too. So I bring them over to the miter box. I clip off the ends that are kind of broken or frayed or cracked or whatever. And then I snip them to an approximate length, little long, so I have some playroom. So I bring them over to the jointer. They're pretty flat, but they're not perfect. Checking for which side's bowed up. You always want to feed it through the jointer bowed up, so you clip the two ends. You actually waste less material and it doesn't rock on you. And, well, it helps if I set my fence so it's actually over the blade. I just waxed the table so the fence was backed off. So let's move it forward and feed them through the joiner and flatten them out a little bit. And then it's off to the planer to do the other side. Now, I don't have dust collection for the planer, so I open my garage door and I kind of just shoot it out into my driveway. Luckily, I live in a semi-wooded area, and I have a dirt driveway, so the sawdust outside doesn't really hurt anything. It builds up, so I do kind of scatter it a little bit with a leaf blower now and again, but I'm kind of lucky there. But I do have to do a proper dust collection for it because it's starting to get chilly outside, and opening that garage door lets cold air in, and I don't like cold air. So that will be one of my next projects, is building a dust collection system. But let's feed these boards to the planer. Quick check to see how much more I have to take off, and then back to the planer. And check for thickness. When it's the right thickness, it's time to close everything back up because it is chilly out. And now it's time to go to the table saw and clean up the two edges. So I'm kind of winging it here, but I'm guesstimating about 1.125 inches is what I need. I'm making it a little bit bigger so I have playroom. As you'll see, to clear the bracket and the boards I'm gluing together, that's about what I need. So let's cut it. So I actually wanted an 1.5 inch finish, but I had to cut both sides, so I actually opened it up another 1/8 of an inch and then brought it back and cut it to the final size. And now that I got the top and bottom pieces cut, I fit them into the bracket holder thingy and measure what the fill piece will be. So make more sense once you see how I actually build this thing. So more jointing, planing, and table sawing. Now that I got them all planed, jointed, cut to width, it's time to cut all 3 pieces to the same length. Okay, now that I got everything milled to what I'm hoping are the correct sizes, it's time to glue it up into the little C channel. I hope you can sort of understand what I'm trying to do here from the shape and everything. But let's clamp it up and glue it and leave it for a few hours to dry. Alright, so far we've actually just been making the, T-track, I guess you'd call it. So we now need to find a piece of material that will be the actual fence. So back to digging in the wood pile. Again, I'm trying to find a piece of scrap that I can use, that I can clean up. The problem is most of them have too much damage or cracks or knots, or a lot of this old oak has, if you look down the left-hand edge of that, where my tape measure is, I have the knot, but I also have all that bug rot. But I think I could take that piece out of the middle and get a decent fence face out of it. So let's use this board. So more jointing, planing, milling, cutting, sawing, just snipping it down to try and get a nice clean piece. Now here I am trying to really select the better part of it. It's not a great board. It's got a bunch of holes in it and bug rot and a big knot. But I think I can find a decent face in it. I'll get it. So I finally found a section that I think I can cut out and get a decent fence out of it. And so I rip it down to size. And here I am using the table on the jointer to check it for flatness. I'm seeing a very slight bit of bow. I think it'll be easier to just run it through the planer than try and use a jointer. It'll give me a cleaner final finish, and if you flip it over, you'll get a halfway decent flat face. It'll be straight and parallel on both sides. So let's go to the planer. And more milling. And all done. Putting it on the jointer bed to check it for flatness, and that puppy is flat, so it should make a good reference face for a fence. So after cutting it to length to match everything else for the fence, it's actually time for a short coffee break. So I have this extra piece of aluminum L bracket. It's a little thicker than what I bought for this. It's a piece I had left over. I'm putting it on the top of the actual fence board. And I don't know if it's necessary. I'm kind of doing it because I have it. I hope it's going to hold it straight. I mean, oak will warp over time, blah, blah, blah. So I'm going to screw this L bracket onto the top, hoping that it will keep it straight over time and the board won't warp. Between everything, it probably shouldn't when this is all said and done. I was having issues with the drill bits going through the aluminum. I really don't have any good drill bits anymore for aluminum. My countersink, as you can see, I just broke a drill bit. My countersinks don't really work well with aluminum. I can't find the one I used to use on aluminum, so I kind of went to the old school of use a larger drill bit to make a countersink and then put the screws in to hold it in place. So now it's time to glue the, C channel, I guess you'd call it. C bracket, C channel, whatever, the T-track part to the actual fence. So here I am finagling it, trying to get it together and get everything as flat and straight and flush as I can. So after letting it dry for a couple, 3 hours, kind of went and had dinner. I'm actually going to clean up. I made an absolute mess and I got aluminum chips everywhere from drilling. So let's get all that crap and, just dump it on the floor because, that's brilliant. So after dumping all the crap on the floor, making it tomorrow Tom's problem, let's grab the actual fence and unclip everything. We're actually getting pretty close to done. And let's mount the actual aluminum L brackets that will create the C channel we need to make it work with the Laguna fence. So I'm going to use a little CA glue to hold the aluminum in place. I think it'll just be a little easier to drill everything and get everything aligned. So a little CA glue, a little activator, hold the two pieces of aluminum in place nice and tight, so it's a little easier to drill and screw everything together. And now that the aluminum is kind of sort of mounted, I'm going to permanently mount it with some screws, and I do a couple of quick pilot holes, lay it out as best I can. I wasn't being too particular about it, but I wanted it to look halfway decently neat. And then I drill it out. And I basically used 3 drill bits, again, because I couldn't find the proper countersink. So I used a medium-sized drill bit and punched through the aluminum initially. Then I used a smaller drill bit to pre-drill the oak. And then I used a larger drill bit to countersink because, once again, I couldn't find my proper countersink. And then I screw it all together. And now that the whole thing is pretty much built, I bring it over to the miter box and flush up the end as best I can with all the pieces. Really hate cutting aluminum on the miter box because I mean, it cuts it fine. I just don't like the aluminum chips everywhere in my dust collector, and it's really not good for the blade. And I actually have a halfway decent blade on there, but one cut isn't going to hurt it. And we're basically done building it. So let's bring it over to the bandsaw and, well, give it a test run. Let's fit her on there. Slide it on in. And it's looking pretty good. Really good, actually. Better than I expected. So let's give it a test run. Oh, but, yeah. Gotta turn the power on to the saw first. Yeah, that's more like it. Let's run a board through. Well, that worked. It actually worked really well. Let's go thinner. A good bit thinner. Well, would you look at that? That is pretty nice. And everything seems like it's flat and square and straight. But you know what? I think we can go thinner. Okay, that's pretty nice. Especially considering if you look at that board's all full of bug holes and crap. So yeah, all right. It needs a little finish. I think I'll polyurethane it for a nice durable finish, and then put paste wax on top to make it slippery. But it works. So there it is. A nice little home built fence to be supplemental, not a replacement, but supplemental to the Laguna high-low fence. Pretty nice. It allows me to quite easily slide it in, mount it up, work it, take it back out, use the stock high fence, use the stock low fence, and switch it back. All rather easily.